three.
Good evening, everyone. We're really happy to have you here tonight for the FGF USA webinar, and we are joined by a wonderful panel and our main speaker to talk about liposomal formulas and how FGF has done their homework and getting bioavailability to us in the form of supplementation. And tonight we're going to learn a little bit more about that and how it can help us and our families. So we're going to begin with introducing our main speaker, which is Jeff Essen from Minnesota. Jeff, raise your hand, please.
Hello, Camille.
Jeff's a naturopath, and he's been in our community for a long time, an educator, an avid researcher, and a biker.
Bicycle, not motorcycle.
The pedal kind, yeah. So is it also, sorry, I have to get something out on my screen here. Also, we wanted to introduce the president of FGF USA, Abdel Alkalouf. Abdel, can you raise your hand?
Hello.
Hello, Abdel. How are you doing?
Yes, good, Camille. Thank you so
Good.
much for being here. Yes.
Are you coming to us from Florida tonight?
Yes.
Yeah?
The south part of Florida.
Great. Wow, that sounds wonderful. And also joined into this conversation, really by association in IHHA, which is a wonderful organization that works in the natural community, is Starla Weichman, who is one of the founders of the IHHA. Starla, welcome tonight. And she's also a practitioner and has her own clinic, Be Healthy Naturally. And we also have Tracy Abraham, who is a board member of the IHHA and loves the products as well, and is a practitioner in her own area in Neenah, Wisconsin. And Tracy's business is Amplify Health and Wellness. And I'm Camille. And Camille Gerlich, and I've been in the natural health community for many years, and I am a writer and an author and a marketer in the natural health industry, and a natural health advocate. And so I'm really happy to welcome you here tonight, and we want to welcome Jeff to start his program and help us to really understand what is so special about these formulas.
Well, thank you, Camille. I appreciate the intro, and I'm glad to have all my best friends with me here. FGF is a company that I have been introduced to by Abdel and Starla, as far as that goes, and just saying, hey, you remember Abdel? And I remember Abdel from another venue. It's like, yeah, I liked him. He was always great. And then we sort of lost touch for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey. And we just kind of picked, I mean, like old friends do, we just picked up where we left off, and our conversations kept on evolving. And eventually he says, well, I've got this manufacturing company, we're putting out these products, you should formulate some. And I said, oh, well, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. And it just kind of snowballed from there. But my passion about this formulation line is about the liposomal aspect. And so I've done a lot of research and study. I've looked into this, and I'm very excited about the prospect of bringing liposomal formulas into the FGF line. So this has been a real eye-opening process. I remember the great Dr. Jim Halver and what he always had to do to develop a new product. And it was always test this and formulate that and, send it off, bring it back, see if it tests well on patients. And there's always this process of just trying to perfect everything. And my eyes were opened as to the difficulty of the world of product formulation and manufacturing. So it's been kind of an interesting journey. As far as FGF goes, I found in my own personal practice a great deal of excellent quality product, and that it tests well across the board. In other words, universal application to many different kinds of patient, many different kinds of constitutions, digestive capacity, and so on. So I was going to invite Abdel to talk about the FGA products and why their quality seems to be on par or better than most.
Thank you so much, Jeff. First I want to say FGF stands for Feel Good Forever. And we're very proud and we really like our product. And we work hard to come up with a great product that could benefit. And what's nice and neat about this company is instead of going to manufacturers and start suggesting formulas, when we started the company, we went to practitioners. And based on the feedback that comes from their clients and patients, and based on the products they use on a daily basis, we picked their brain and we started thinking together. What do you need to see? What's missing? What do you like to have in a product? And we started the trip from there. Then we collected the research, we studied the market, we put everything together. We consulted with our biochemists to make sure that these ingredients are great to work together. There is synergy, they complement, each other. And then from that point, we started sourcing the best materials we can reach to. And then we ended up with those great formulas. That being said, we started using the products and we always get a feedback and we always tweak and change. Trying just to come up with what's needed, what's really on daily basis, what do you need in your clinics, and what is gonna benefit your clients and patients.
Yeah, excellent. And now we have a couple of practitioners who've been using the FGF formulas for a while now. Starla or Tracy, you want to make any comments as to your experience about the FGA products?
Yeah, I'll go first. I could probably talk for a couple hours about all the products that I love. But I would first of all say, we have no control over what shows up when we're testing clients. But FGF consistently shows up at the top of the list. The other thing is, at the end of the year, you get a report from all your sales. My number one seller is Vita from FGF. So, people wouldn't reorder if it wasn't working. So they really do have great products. And just one personal experience, we had a guy bring in his labs. Vitamin D was bottomed out. All we gave him was Vital Duo, which is D3K2. Within 3 months, came back in, ran the labs. It was at the high end of normal. So yeah, I could go on and on, but those are just a couple of things that I definitely wanted to share because those are.
Uh-oh.
I can jump on too here. I will say, I think my connection might be a little unstable, so I apologize if I break up. But same here. I'm also a natural health practitioner up here in Wisconsin, and I specialize in bioenergetic screenings as well. Same exact thing, like Starla had said, FGF products consistently, day after day, show up at the top of the list. I have had, even just within the last hour here, I had a client in before the webinar tonight, and she was only on a protocol for 8 weeks. And within the first 2 weeks, she had said that her menopause hot flashes had completely gone away with the product support. And that is not the first time we've heard of that. I've also had clients consistently that are on Vital Circ, which is for circulatory cardiovascular support. That time and again, their blood pressure stabilizes as a result of being on that product. So kudos to Dr. Abdel. Thank you for taking the time and effort to formulate these along with your co-partners here, because we're getting amazing results with our clients as a result.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Starla. Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate the comments. And for those who are listening, it's probably likely that you're a person who also does some version of electrodermal or biofeedback kind of testing. That's kind of our audience. There also may be those people who are maybe more an electrodermal screener, but not the applied kinesiology or muscle testing kind of practitioner. Whatever the case, you're asking the body what it needs, not just guessing. And so what we want to have is something in a product line that has that universal application. That one product may apply to 10 different patients. You don't have to have 10 products for those 10 different patients. So we're trying to cover a large area and having the most dynamic impact on all kinds of different systems of the body. So, as we go here, there's, myself, I'll introduce myself, I guess. I have been in the natural health field for over 20 years, coming up on 23 years this July. That entire time, I've been using biofeedback technology, different electrodermal devices, different, other sort of biofeedback technology. And in that time, I'm a voracious class taker person. And so I have literally dozens of different certifications in different kinds of different medicine or expertise within the natural health field. So I've got, I got a stack of these things. I don't have room on a wall to hang them. But I am very interested in autoimmune disorders. Autoimmunity is sort of my specialty. I can look at any patient and sort of weave my mind into, well, what's going on with them from an autoimmune point of view. And in the words of one of my professors in this field, says, when a woman over 40 walks in your office, just ask, which autoimmune diseases does she have? One is you make the presumption she has autoimmunity. Two, you make the presumption that it's more than one. That's the way our world is shaping up to be. That's how we as practitioners need to take a look at how our patient base is coming into us. So that's something that's a big deal. And then with Starla, myself, Dr. Akalouf, and now Tracy, we have this organization called the International Holistic Health Alliance. And in this case, we're trying to bring science and medical education to people. We're trying to also bring complex medical ideas and hard to understand concepts within medicine down to the local level. And just to point out, we had an event a few weeks ago in April near Starla's home in Iowa, where we brought a presentation to an Amish community. Now, the Amish community has limitations on how they can access information. And so we were happy to bring them all kinds of new information about the most common causes of disease. We had some good questions asked of us. And so we really like bringing that education around. That's what the IHHA is all about. And as the IHHA president, I really am passionate about the idea that education is everything here. So tonight, I'm going to try to educate you as to what liposomal formulas are all about. So I'm going to start off here just in the general sense of the idea of kind of what mentality I had going into this. That most of the time in my experience, in over 20 years worth of biofeedback testing, you're introduced to a product line. Now, the product line, for the most part, has been made by people who look at the chemistry of things, who look at how this would, by the books, help someone. And then they put together a product based on the science available at the time as to, here's the expected result. And then when I, the biofeedback tester, was presented with this line of product, I had to somehow get samples input into the machine, or in the old fashioned way, take little samples and put them on the plate and test each one individually, those were nightmare days compared to today. Now, in this case, the product lines weren't necessarily individually geared just for biofeedback, and most of the time they were geared at specific conditions. Here is the formula for blood pressure. Here is the formula for hot flashes. Here's the formula for IBS or other digestive disorders. And they got so specific that you had to have in a line of products 100, 200 individual products because you had so many different symptoms you were trying to address. My idea for the liposomal formulas, especially where it concerns biofeedback practitioners, was when we test the body, we'll get, okay, the kidney is either low in its energy or too high in its energy. And so for that kidney, we understand that it's not balanced and it's either in that degenerative phase or inflamed phase. We have that generalized idea that the kidney is imbalanced. And if we're integrating Western medical science with things like Ayurvedic medicine and the traditional Chinese medicine, other sort of systems of medicine that recognize that that kidney might have multiple layers of a problem, it's too easy to isolate in on, oh, well, they have nephritis, or they have kidney stones, or they're dehydrated, or whatever's going on. In that case, too much energy is spent on chasing after an individual circumstance, when in fact, if you were to take a look at it from every medical perspective from around the world, there might be 5 or 6 problems there. So in that case, instead of focusing on the one, let's address the entire organ. Let's get that whole kidney, top to bottom, every layer of it, even into the emotional aspect of it. Let's get into the kidney as a whole organ. So in that example, we would have a remedy that has all kinds of different aspects of how it aids the kidney. It would affect that kidney on positive levels all the way through. So we as biofeedback practitioners then have a one remedy go-to substance that we can just say, here's this bottle, and no matter what's going on, this will help address it. So this was my idea for the entire liposomal line, is to get a little bit more broad so that we have a more inclusive thing, that one remedy can do a lot of good for one patient. We don't have to load them up with 5 or 6 of them for the kidneys in that example. Now, why liposomal? This is sort of the newest trend in the industry, that liposomals, or liposomal meaning fat, so that these are essential fatty acids, phospholipids. These are fatty acid formulas as a baseline substance in which you then put either your nutrients or your herbs. Now, the traditional method has been either a dry product, where there's a dry tableting base with nutrients and herbs built into it, or there has been the idea of the liquid tincture, the classic alcohol tincture, especially for herbs. That's been the mainstay of how things are done. Now, there's some things that are more, there are things that are put in gel caps that tend to be more lipid based. So there's some newer things coming on the market that are sort of in between. But a liposomal product is very interesting in that it's been used by the pharmaceutical industry now for a while, because it's recognized that you have hydrophilic, or things that are attracted to or bind with water. And then there are lipophilic things that are attracted to or bind with fats. And we all know oil and water don't mix. They're polar opposites, and based on their pH and their electrical charge differential, you get oil and water not being able to mix with one another. We can take advantage of that. That's the whole thing about liposomal formulas, is they take advantage, because now if we embed our nutrients and herbs into the liposomal formula, I'll show this in a little bit, that means that the way it's delivered and processed and gotten out to the body and where it goes to the body can differ based on, is it hydrophilic or lipophilic? We can take advantage of those circumstances that we're going to get a different kind of delivery for each component of what's in that formula. It's a really cool and interesting method. And again, this is even being used now with pharmaceutical drugs in ways that are very interesting too. So this is a model from a study done in 2003. And just to kind of point out here, is in the upper left corner. I can't get my, there's my cursor. So here we have a hydrophobic drug. Now, hydrophobic, afraid of water. So this is something that doesn't like to be in water. And that's embedded in the interior of the lipid membrane. Now we also then have a hydrophilic drug, meaning it's a friend of water, it likes water, that's inside in the water area here. So to understand this, let's go back to basic anatomy and the cell membrane. On the outside, we have these blue dots. There's a blue dot, there's a blue dot. Now those are, in the lipid membrane of every cell, are the hydrophilic. They're, even though they're made of fat, their polar charge is such that it's okay for them to be next to water. They're all right with that. So you can see the water inside this molecule, there's water outside the molecule. And so these water, water affiliated or hydrophilic molecules are to the outside. But then there's the squiggly lines in the interior. Those are the hydrophobic or lipophilic versions of the construction of that membrane. And so there what we get is that those two are attracted to one another, so they hold a polar distance from one another. So here you have this outside layer and inside layer of a wall being held together by the structural support of fats that are attracted to one another, coming in like this and holding the thing at a distance from one another. This is how all our cellular lipid membranes go. This is how liposomal formulas are. So when we put this formula together, here's this liposomal base that has the ability to say, for those things that are very fat attracted, they'll embed themselves in this fat attracted area. For those things that are water attracted, they'll be able to go to this inner circle that is surrounded by fat. And imagine this is a two-dimensional version. Imagine this to be a ball, a three-dimensional version. So here's this inner center that's all water inside this. So here we have taken nutrients and herbs, and the nutrients and herbs will divide themselves. Those that are hydrophilic, water liking, will migrate toward the middle. Those that are lipophilic lipophilic, liking fat, will embed themselves in the wall of this. Now that makes a big difference where it comes to the distribution and how this is all broken apart and when these things become available. So we'll get in that in just a little bit, but notice there are also things where and this is a pharmaceutical model, by the way. This is not for nutrients, but here there's different things that you can actually do to say, let's go exactly looking for different kinds of affiliation based on different kinds of content of a drug. And we're talking about nutrients, we're talking about herbs. The number of compounds is so large, you couldn't specify that in our model, but in the pharmaceutical industry, they can. Now, this is a study published in 2015. This is in the Frontiers of Pharmacology, and it talks about some of the advantages. And now, again, remember, these are pharmaceutical drugs talking to medical doctors about liposomal delivery, but we can extrapolate that to our own use also. And in that, there's several things in these pages that I think are very valuable for us to pay attention to. Large unmodified liposomes, in other words, these large fat molecules, are eliminated more rapidly than small, neutral, or positively charged, meaning that the bigger content we make, they're actually chewed apart faster than if they're small. And so interestingly, we want kind of a small presence, but the presence of a high electrostatic charge, in other words, this is the pH relative electrical charge of the polarity between water and oil or fat, can serve as, can promote the interaction of liposomes with biomolecules that can serve as opsonins. Opsonins are things that would distribute and break things down. Now, in that case, in integrating cholesterol into there, the electrostatically neutral liposome has been shown to prolong the circulation time. What does that mean? That means when we have more fat, in this case, in the form of cholesterol, it would lengthen the amount of time it would take to distribute all the nutrient contents and herbs out to the body. There can be an advantage to that. There's things that we want to be long lasting. We want them to be distributed over time into the body so that we have a duration of effect that's beneficial. So say, for instance, pain relief. There are those things that we would want for long-term chronic pain. So when we take a dose, it's going to last all the way till our next dose. We won't tail off before and feel more pain by the time we get to our next dose. So addition of charged lipids, in other words, charged, again, electrical polarity based on the fat versus water content of the lipobilayer has played an important role in the developing of a bioadhesive, mucoadhesive, and nucleic acid delivery systems. In other words, we're starting to get specific as to where are these things going to go based on the polarity charge of these fat molecules. And so in case of, say, for instance, in the gastrointestinal tract, if you have a cationic nano delivery system, now cations, I put a little diagram over here. Cation is positively charged because it has a negative electron or -1 electron. So in that case, the positively charged system has been shown to adhere to the mucosal surface within an inflamed GI. So let's just say somebody has irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, etc. That means that a cationic dense charged fat molecule is going to adhere to that mucosal surface more so than it would other areas of the GI. So if we want to specify, let's go after the inflammation of the GI, we'd want a cationic fat molecule. And that's been worked into some of the formulas here. So conversely, though, an anionic, it's a negative charge, nano delivery system would adhere to inflamed GI tissue by electrostatic interaction with a positively charged proteins in inflamed regions. So it's, are you clinging to the mucosal surface or are you clinging to the inflamed cells? Either one could be inflamed, but based on the polar charge, you can have a different adhesion. And so this is being worked into, can we get a more specific delivery into the system by what charge it has? Now, both the fat base that the formulas are in, as well as the nutrients like minerals, as well as some of the actual herbs have charge potential. And that's all going to sort itself out, and it'll go after the area that's most needed. Is it going to get to the mucosal inflammation or the cellular inflammation in the GI, as an example? And that can be any system you want to name. The inflamed versus the mucosal is going to be a targeting mechanism for all the liposomal formulas. So again, this is just one of those things where it has a lot to do with charge. And one thing I'll mention about charge in a little bit, that has a lot to do with minerals. It has a lot to do with your pH and other factors. Now, here we have multidisciplinary tools is referring to the idea that unlike the pharmaceutical model that we saw a little bit ago, we want to work with a broad spectrum, multi-impact formula set. And so we work with herbs. Now, because FGF has this manufacturing capacity, and they can source and get some of the best quality, highest organic and all that kind of quality materials for herbs, we know that everything that goes into the herbal product is going to be the best quality version of an herb. Now, I've also, in terms of my formulations, delved into Western herbs from Europe. I've looked at Native American herbs. I've looked at Amazonian herbs. I've looked at Chinese herbs, Ayurvedic herbs. I looked through the gamut of different herbs from around the world and different systems of medicine to try to take the best things from each of those systems and incorporate them into a synergistic formula here. Now, the thing that also is interesting is that in the herbal world, yes, there are herbs that are studied. There are herbs that do have their double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. There's university studies on a lot of these herbs. But one thing that's ignored sometimes is that there's this idea of traditional use. That means, let's just say we're down in the Amazon and we meet this tribe of people down there who've been using a particular herb for a particular kind of condition, and they've been using it for, as far as we know, thousands of years. And because it has been so beneficial for them, we could take and use and do an experiment. Hey, if we give it to people with similar conditions in other environments, does it also do them some good? Oh, okay. Well, the tradition of use and a modern application and distribution of that same product in a different base of people derives the same result, then we can call traditional use as a study, which is an interesting thing in the herbal world. And so it's traditional use is we don't have to have a plethora of studies about an herb to use it. So then we get into the nutritional. Now, nutrition is obviously studied a great deal more in university and classical like FDA, NIH studies. Nutrients are well studied, and people know about them more so. Now, in that case, a lot of the nutrients that are in these products are to enhance that polar charge that I talked about, or that they are a necessary catalyst for some of the herbs to do their work. In other words, if we want herb X to accomplish a certain set of tasks, it has to have zinc or something like this to make that action happen. By itself, it might run short of being able to complete the metabolic pathway. And so a lot of the nutrition that's in there are cofactors or catalysts to allow the herbs to work their best. And then, for biofeedback devices, I know most of you who use a biofeedback device have the capability of imprinting. Now, remembering that our imprint of a product where we're putting frequencies into a base bottle, we're using alcohol most of the time because it has carbon structures. And the carbon structures in alcohol are easily rearranged to then hold the pattern of the homeopathic imprint. What we're doing here with the FGF liposomal formulas is there's alcohol in there, plus there's also the lipid product that has its own carbon structures, and then you have the herbs that have their own carbon structures. But remembering that these are separated into different delivery systems and times, each imprint that you do is going to be one that's immediately acting, one that lasts a longer time, and one that's more, sort of universal and lasts, more broadly and more universally. So the idea is that you can actually, through the same imprint, have different effects occur, some more immediate and some more delayed, by use of that as an imprint bottle to put your imprints in there. And then when people take their FGF formulas, they're getting the homeopathic benefit as well as the herbal nutritional benefit. So I encourage people to use maybe these, and we'll go over the two products here in a little bit. That there's the respiratory system based one. There's also the urinary system based one. So if somebody has a urinary problem and you want a good imprint bottle, try the Lipo KMB. If somebody's got a respiratory problem all the way up into the sinuses, try the Lipo Pulmo as an imprint bottle for your, when you finally build your, your tank or whatever it is that you use to imprint this stuff in there. I think it's a really good use for that. And then, about liposomal delivery, again, this is the idea, just trying to put forth again, that the protein structures in things, a lot of these things in herbs would be alkaloids, that they have a polar charge that's quicker to separate from the lipid transport. We saw that little center molecule that is all water-based. That's going to very quickly break apart, and it's going to distribute the water out into the system. Now, we are mainly water-based, especially our blood and our lymph are water-based. So it's going to very quickly distribute through that system. So when you take a liposomal product like this, the protein structures, the alkaloids, the medically acting agents are going to be more water-based, and you're going to have a very fast delivery from that. Because they were lipid, though, they got through the digestive system as if they were fats. So they're going to go through unchanged. They're not going to be as broken down because of digestion. So they're going to get into the bloodstream raw and fast. So immediate action is the profile of the water-based version of these products. But then we also have the lipid-based version. Remember, that's embedded inside that dual membrane, that lipid barrier. In that case, that's going to stick together for a while. It'll form individual little globules of just fat. Now, it takes the body a while to break that fat down. Cholesterol can go cruising through your bloodstream for a long time without being broken down. Similarly here, this would slowly break those lipid molecules apart. Lipase and other agents in your bloodstream would do that. And then what's eventually going to happen is then their payload distributes over a longer time and more slowly. So you're going to get a long, slow distribution or slow release of the lipid-based compounds. And some of those lipid-based compounds in these herbs could even be essential oils, because as they manufacture the herbal products, some of those oils might stay embedded within the herbal product. So we're really kind of working on the idea of immediate impact and then slow release, remembering that some of the immediate impact on the proteins might have a certain aspect about it. It might be more aggressive towards one property that it's trying to do. And then the lipid ones will have a different property about them, but that's going to be the longer term. So this will be interesting. Again, I'd like a lot of feedback on this, is what do people encounter when they take this sort of dual natured remedy immediately and then over a longer term during the whole dosage time. And so this is going to be kind of interesting, because this is our first venture into this, and I'm really interested to have feedback from practitioners how these do. Now, absorbed and tolerated is going to be better. Fats are a little bit easier than a lot of these herbs are. In other words, many of the digestive problems that people have with herbs, they'll take the herb and they'll have an acid stomach, they'll burp, they'll have repeat burps actually of the flavor of things. They just get a really bad digestive experience. One of the problems here is because these proteins are hard for the stomach to break down, and so many people have poor stomachs. They have stomachs that aren't capable of digesting because they lack hydrochloric acid. They might have an overly thin mucosal barrier there from lack of pepsin production. And so in that case, they might have a sensitivity to these things. In the case of these liposomal formulas, they are lipids, and so they're fats. And so the stomach just basically ignores them. Oh, that's fat, just pass it on. There's nothing to do here. Pass that on so the gallbladder and the bile can break that down. Meaning that the digestive tolerance should be much better here, because you end up in that situation of not even dealing with the stomach. So as these go in, again, these lipids are going to break down a little bit, and they're going to then say, okay, well, this is just this lipid thing that's already a small molecule. We don't have to digest it. It's already broken down as much as it's going to be broken down. Bile doesn't even need to do anything. And so now it'll go directly into the system and go right into the bloodstream and lymph. Now, I would say is that because this is liposomal, there might be that odd person who's missing their gallbladder. And if they really struggle with fat digestion, they might have some trouble breaking this down adequately from a digestive point of view, but that's not really all that necessary. The the bloodstream does have enzymes that break down lipids within there. And so that doesn't necessarily have to occur, but there might be that odd person that if they take these remedies and they're missing their gallbladder, they might get a burp where they have a bit of a repeat of the taste. I don't think that's going to be a big problem though. Now, liposomal science is, again, not limited to natural medicine, and there's pharmaceutical medicine doing some interesting studies. These are a little bit hard to see because they're small, but I tried to throw them in here. And if you want to look up the study that's over on the left, you can see these in greater detail. But to explain to you what they are is what they did is they took a molecule substance that they're trying to show its distribution in the body. Now, in this case, they took a regular alcohol-based tincture and introduced it into a rat. And then those are the pictures on the left. And so everywhere where you see the green stain on the left is where that substance ended up in the rat's brain. When you look at the pictures that are on the right side of each three of these diagrams, the little red highlighted ones were the ones that were in the liposomal molecule. So in other words, they took the same exact substance in the same exact dose, but encapsulated it in that liposomal ball, and then it stained red. So you can see that there's quite a bit of red stain as compared to there's none in the other one, that the delivery system is so good for liposomal that there's areas of the body, like the central nervous system, that's almost impossible to get stuff into the brain without having a liposomal delivery mechanism behind it. Very interesting study though, and this again, working with pharmaceuticals, this was for brain cancer, what they're experimenting with. And so, and good for them, because brain cancer is a terrible, awful thing and hard thing to work with. So maybe there's some targeting that they can do. Now, this is where you get into the products. I have to say I'm rather proud of these. I did do a lot of work, a lot of testing, a lot of research, and just kind of looking at things. And for the Lipo KMB, the idea here was that we wanted to do as much as possible to work with a broad spectrum of things, understanding that, again, the kidney, the bladder is a complex system. It's not just one organ, it's a whole system put together, and that there can be many, many problems built within. And so here we're looking at a number of ingredients, and just to kind of go through them: D-mannose, vitamin C, selenium, zinc, the herbal blend of buku, uva ursi, corn silk, Spanish moss, chrysanthemum, indicum, cordalis, mushroom or marshmallow root, tart cherry, cranberry, Phyllanthus neruri, otherwise known as Chanca-piedra. That's one of those Amazonian herbs. It means to break stones, and so that's very useful for a lot of people. Primrose flower, Echinacea angustifolia, Termicalia, bellerica, otherwise known as juniper. Now, when we looked up the quality of these things, what do all of those ingredients do? What is their purpose and function? We're looking at supporting the immunity. In other words, there's lots of people who get UTIs, women especially. And so repeated UTIs, almost every one of these ingredients has a role to play in working at improving the urinary system's immunity. Toxin clearance, the ability to perform the removal of acid and particle waste from the bloodstream, is enhanced by virtue of some of these ingredients. They normalize the renin production. Now, renin, if you don't know that system, it's a good thing to look up. Renin is produced by the kidneys, ends up going through multiple different iterations before it finally reaches the blood vessel lining to determine whether we have high blood pressure or low blood pressure. And so in this case, it's affecting what's called the angiotensin 1 and 2. Well, if you get a better production of renin from the kidneys, there's the tendency to have a more abundant angiotensin 1, which would lower blood pressure. And so this is where we can kind of working on blood pressure from its original source, the original instigator of how we regulate blood pressure. And would be very, it's very good to do that. Now, instills a diuretic activity. There's so many people with excess fluid, edema, congested hearts, congested lungs, just a lot of extra fluid retention around leaky gut. Leaky gut has a bulging aspect to the belly because the immune system's piling on water in order to dilute all the immune activity that's going on there. But that extra water then gets polluted and full of debris and material and dead immune cells and so on, that becomes almost septic. Well, we need the kidneys to clear this kind of waste. So this would help also clear that waste. It aids in proper calcium balance. In other words, calcitonin produced in the kidneys as a mechanism of helping calcium to get into the bone cell. Kidneys are also responsible for that. And part of that mechanism also applies to the kidney's management of pH. So our blood and lymphatic pH is largely regulated by how much calcium the kidneys pull out of the bones to put into the bloodstream to regulate that pH. And so there's a management of pH mechanism to how the kidneys regulate calcium. And then just plain old urinary flow. And then both men and women both seem to have their own version of urinary flow problems. And so there's a number of different things that we can do there to just say the urine that's in the bladder is going to flow more readily, more quickly, without interruption, and completely void. And that's a big deal. You want to make sure you completely void, or then you're prone to infections. So realistically speaking, this is a broad spectrum, covers all the most common elements, and also kind of gets into the idea with some of these herbs, especially some like the primrose flower, that starts to actually, in homeopathic, flower essence world, starts to alleviate some of the fear and irritation. In the Chinese model, the kidneys are all about a dysfunctional emotion of fear. The bladder is about irritation, or too easily moved to emotional response. You could say that you could see it as a society. We're very much more bladder irritated than we used to be, because we more easily get pissed off or more triggered, we could also add. So in this case, there's aspects of this that also work on that emotional level. There's different versions of how this would bind the relationship emotionally and from a meridian standpoint between the kidney and bladder. Sometimes those become separated. If you talk to an acupuncturist, say, are the kidney and bladder always in sync? Oh, no. They're very often in different, different ideas about them. And so this would cover that whole spectrum of very physical things, very different how the kidneys influence the rest of the body's health, and also then that emotional aspect. And so it really is a complete urinary system. One remedy covers a lot of ground in that arena. And so that it has been working very well for people. I've had the advantage of having some of these in my office now for a while, and I've been testing them on people, and boy, they really do well. And in fact, the whole incontinence issue for women, especially women who've had a number of children, they have difficulty controlling their valve that releases the urine. This has done a good job with them too. And then the Pulmo kind of referring to the old, Latin name for the respiratory system. This is trying to get after, again, the entire system, anywhere from the actual lungs, up the bronchial tubes, the trachea, on up into the pharynx area and sinuses. So this is not just the lungs and the chest, this is the entire respiratory system. And so there we've got vitamin A, extremely important, vitamin D, magnesium, selenium, huperzine A, really, really good at decreasing inflammation. Proprietary blend of mullein leaf, anise seed powder, plantain powder, nettle root, bupleurum, kelliseed, Eucalyptus citriodora, thyme, and not thyme like the clock, thyme like the herb, yellow flower powder or yarrow flower, ginger root, and apricot kernel oil. And apricot kernel oil in this case adds on to the additional amount of the sunflower phospholipids. So we have two different fats in here. Again, trying to make sure that we have this very mucosal oriented organ, and that we need a couple of different fats to say where's the mucus or where's the dry area to deliver the different components of the thing. And so it needed to have two different fats, and the apricot kernel oil did a fine job of that. Now, this would help the immune system, and this would go for people with any version of infection, from a lung infection all the way up into the tonsil area and sinus infections as well. Potentially, this could even go into ear infections for children. That I don't know for sure. I didn't find any research on it, but I would say there's a good chance it would. This regulates the mucosal barrier. We don't want too much mucus, but we want some. We need that exactly sort of Goldilocks, just exactly the right barrier to make sure that we don't get things into our bloodstream through that barrier that would be harmful. But yet we also need to be able to exchange the gases through a thin enough barrier. It has to be just right. And so this would, from a number of different perspectives, regulate that barrier so we have just the right amount. And during an illness of the respiratory system, of course, the mucus is used to cough or nasal express any kind of organism toxins. And this would also help to make that work more efficiently and be productive. There's so many people I've seen over the years, they have a dry, unproductive cough from an infection. That unproductive cough is doing them no good. There's no expulsion of the organisms, and yet it's really wearing down their system. So this would actually make it more a productive cough in that case. It is an antitussive, meaning that would help with a cough. Any antitussive will help to work with the mechanisms of that tickly feeling that people get in their lungs that instigate the cough. So this would be useful, again, for children, especially when they get to things like RSV or other versions of infection that would cause a coughing mechanism. This would be a good one to go to. It also works with, of course, here we are in mid-May, and the flowers and the trees and the weeds are just throwing the pollen out. And so in that case, allergies for airborne particles. And we also, right now in Minnesota, we have the smoke from and ash from the fires in northwestern in Canada are all with poor air quality. Where there's this idea of poor air quality with lots of particles, this is a very good remedy. It helps to expel them and reduce the overt immune response to them. This might also help with oxygen intake. And so in other words, there's that person who might be a little hypoxic or lack of oxygen delivery to the cells. And it might not necessarily be from anemia. It might be because they simply don't breathe deeply enough and they can't exchange enough gas through these diminished lung capacities. So that would be very good for them. We have metabolic congestion. Now, what I mean by that is that the lungs are very lymphatically dense and surrounded by lymph. But what if our lymph area is full of particle matter? Now that can come from any number of sources, leaky gut being the worst of them, but there's many possible things. And if our spleen and our kidneys and our liver can't clean all that debris up, it can congest around the liver and the pleura surrounding the lungs. So in this case, our lungs can be infused with particle-laden lymph, and we need to clear that congestion. And so this clearing metabolic congestion could lead towards there now being a clear, clean fluid of the lungs. This would help the lungs to be able to expand. It would help their gaseous exchange. It would have them feel less prone to coughing if all that debris was removed. And then there's the idea of a proper dilation of the bronchi, meaning that as far as the bronchi go, if they're narrowing, that means it's harder to breathe. And if they get narrow enough, that can cause a restriction in airflow, a wheezing, and in the ultimate expression of that, it's asthma. And so this would actually support the proper modulation of the dilation of the bronchi. I should note, though, one of the best things as an assistant to that would be adrenal support. So something like the Vita or the support remedies from FGF would also be a good one to throw in with that for that person with constricted bronchial tubes. So again, this is just another example of how liposomal, you're going to have different immediate impacts. You're going to have those things that last a longer time. You're going to have those things that go towards the heavier mucus areas like internal lung, but maybe some of the drier areas, like some people's sinuses get real dry. This would moisten that. So it just has a diversity that any respiratory problem that comes up in your biofeedback testing, this has a good chance of covering whatever's going on. So those are the two products that we've introduced so far. Now, in the future, we're looking at a number of different products. And again, we have you, the biofeedback tester, in mind. We're trying to address the most common things you're going to find. We're going to try to address broader spectrum, whole organ or whole gland or whole system kind of things, so that we can then say, hey, we're covering the needs of this one finding that you get in your testing. And can this one remedy cover all bases for you? We'd love to have that occur. And so we're looking at different innovative blends of herbs and nutrition and even fats, again, trying to put this all together as a whole line of products so that any EDS biofeedback result you get, there's an FGF liposomal formula just for that. So that's kind of the review of these two products and liposomal delivery in general. I hope that that's been educational for you. I think we may have some questions in the chat, or if we want to maybe open up the microphone so people can speak. I don't know how we want to do that.
If anybody has a question at this point,
yeah.
You're welcome to raise your hands.
I looked through the chat and I didn't see any actual questions. Lots of positive comments.
Yeah.
Oh, here's one. Okay, good. What specific product did you use for female balance? Well, we don't have that one yet as far as the liposomal products, but I would defer probably to to Starla and Tracy, they may have seen more of this than I have, of what products are best for female hormone balance.
With FGF, we've been using the vitamin D, the Vital Duo D3K2. Obviously, that's not just a vitamin, it's also a hormone. But and then the support as well has been really fabulous with because it's for adrenal. So it's got the stress part of things. Let's face it, our women, our mothers were stressed to the max. So it's got the adrenal support, it's got the thyroid support, and it's also got the pancreas support. So it's got the digestive enzymes that's going to help regulate things in the digestive system as well. So little trifecta of brilliance there.
Do you have one other question? What do you think about this product and COPD?
So the Lipo Pulmo, the respiratory system product, I think it would be fantastic for that. Again, this, COPD, for those who don't know, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder is basically, again, the idea that you're going to get a constriction of the bronchial tubes. You're going to get this narrowing and a difficulty in breathing in. People who have it say it feels like you're trying to breathe in with somebody sitting on your chest. And so what COPD is caused by usually would be some version of food allergen, and then they tend to ignore that as the causal factor. But it can get quite serious. It can even kill people because they literally just can't breathe. Now, as far as that product goes, yeah, I'd say the Lipo Pulmo would be the first thing to go with. I would really aggressively go after that because the bronchodilation aspects to almost every ingredient. I had to do these pages of looking at each ingredient and then referencing the research material out there for each ingredient. And you get to be redundant. It's like every single product was bronchodilator, bronchodilator, bronchodilator. And so it was a case where almost every ingredient in that would have its own role to play in a bronchodilation. And again, in COPD, this is more of a lung issue rather than upper respiratory sinus. And so in that case, the liposomal delivery is going to go towards the more mucousy, heavy aspects. So those fat-based things in the formula are going to have more of an emphasis for the lungs themselves. And so I would say that would be very good for COPD. But again, I would also really focus attention on the lungs in that case. I would look, I'm sorry, at the lungs, at the adrenals, and that relationship between the adrenals as bronchodilators. If somebody has asthma, they have a nebulizer, right? An inhaler. What's in that inhaler? Corticosteroids, or basically adrenal hormone. And so in this case, yes, go with the Lipo Pulmo, but I would add some additional adrenal support in there. And that could be the support remedy. That could be, to the point of, even the Vital Circ might get that going a bit too. So there's a number of different things you could do for COPD. Yes, Lipo Pulmo, though, absolutely.
Okay, and another question, would this work for high altitude issues?
I hadn't thought about that because there is an aspect of it, though, where there's an increase of gaseous exchange because of a modulated mucosal membrane. I would say, yes, it would be. And that would apply towards Camille because she lives, well, at least near high altitude.
A lot of people I know. Yeah. And a lot of us. Any other questions? Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Essen? If not, I wanted to let you know that these new products were just delivered to the warehouse, and they're available now, and they're within reason. The prices retail are $49.99. If you want to order them, you can go to our website, FGFUSA.com, or you can contact me directly. My email is Camille Ann with an E Carlson at gmail.com, and I work with Ovid and Amon, and so I'll make sure they get that order. So yeah, I really believe that this is a whole new era, and this is exciting. And we want to just make sure at the tail end of this that we let people know that these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, but We sure like talking about them.
And does Abdel have any comments about tonight's presentation? Is anything, how excited is he for these products?
Well, Dr. SM, you're really smart, man. I like how you put everything in, you know, just very scientific. At the same time, it was easy to understand, and myself, I'm excited about taking those products now.
Good.
And yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate you and this effort, and I appreciate every single one on this call. And I see names, and thank you for being here. Thanks for the support. Daniel is here. Steve K is here, which is amazing. Lynn, Carla, and everyone. If I didn't mention a name, thank you so much for being here.
Well, that about does it, and we just want to give a special round of applause to Jeff, and thank you, and we hope that you grace us with your presence again.
All right, I'd be happy to come back when the next products are out.
Yeah, that'll be it for tonight. We really appreciate everyone showing up, and we appreciated the wealth of knowledge that you shared with us. So good night, everybody.